Okay, I think we're live. So welcome to everyone. We're just going to give a bit of time just to allow people to sort of join the link. But whilst we're waiting, hopefully some people have had a chance to check out some of the other talks this week. And please feel free in the comments to share any of your thoughts of how it's been so far. And I was just talking to Golnaz, and we would love to hear as well where you guys are, a little bit about yourselves, what you're studying, or maybe what interested you to join this space today with us. So yeah, feel free to use the comments, and you can add any questions that you're going to have as well. We'll answer them towards the end. But yeah, we're just going to wait a little bit longer just as people come in. But I hope that everyone is well.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed this session. Yes, as Carmel said, we will wait a few minutes and then we kick off.
Yep. And this is good. People are in the comfort of their homes, you know. Maybe you're just taking a break and you're going for a walk. You don't need to worry about the camera, the mic.
Carmel, you have a nice plant in your room.
Something pretty to look at rather than people's faces.
You know,
all right.
Positive energy.
Great. So hopefully there's been enough time for people to join. So yeah, just welcome to everyone from wherever you might be tuning in from. A very warm welcome to our session today with our guest speaker, Golnaz Ighany. And just to thank you guys in advance as well for agreeing to comply with the Sussex Students' Union's zero tolerance policy, which you agreed to by signing up to this event. So that means that any inappropriate comments or hate, discrimination won't be tolerated. So thank you for bringing your good vibes only. And I'm very excited to welcome Golnaz, who is not only a friend of mine, but also a friend to us all, since she'll be presenting to us how we can be the change, advancing the well-being of the people and our planet. And what more is a friend for if they aren't helping us to really think about how we can be the best versions of ourselves and society? So whatever your discipline of study or your personal interest is, I'm certain that everyone tuning in live now will be determined to be this change in a world that is so clutched by rampant materialism and this fanatic individualism. So a bit more about our guest speaker. Golnaz is currently a sustainability manager at Stanton Williams, where she oversees all of the sustainability requirements of their practice and their projects. And she's going to share her insights with us on the holistic application of sustainability and why it's important for us to realize the immense potential that is ours in this regards. Golnaz is acutely aware of the diversity and multidisciplinary dimensions to sustainability, as she is currently working with a carbon neutral company, having previously worked in multidisciplinary and applied research, and also with a consultancy team for over 8 years. So as such, her work spans across architectural and engineering disciplines, with her primary focus and passion on innovations in sustainability and environmental design. So I hope this is giving you a taste of how Golnaz's work and approach is a part of this solution to climate change, a solution that Golnaz passionately believes requires more people like yourselves to bring about more creativity in this industry, especially critical during this time of crisis. Golnaz's passions also lie in architecture, in which she received her master's degree before going on to gain her PhD at the University of Palermo in Italy. She is also a published academic author, an international guest speaker and visiting lecturer, and currently an active member of the Emerging Simulation Technology Committees and IBIPSA-USA Research, which stands for the International Building Performance Simulation Association. Climate change is the challenge which now embraces everything that we do individually and collectively. So over to Golnaz, who will inspire us to see how we can play our part in building a better future.
Thank you so much, Carmel. That was a really kind introduction. Thanks a lot. Yes, I just wanted to welcome everyone and thanks for joining us. And I'm going to talk about my story and what inspired me to become who I am right now and what I'm doing. And hopefully I will inspire someone else to make an impact in the future. As Carmel said, the title of this presentation is Be the Change, Advancing the Wellbeing of the People on Our Planet. I divided our presentation in a few sections that is kind of somehow is a takeaway of what I would like to transmit and, for you to take out of this presentation. So the first part of this presentation is about choosing a career that is aligned with your values and strive to impact positively the environment and common good of the society. Just explain you a little bit about my journey. When I finished my studies, I immediately moved to London, and that was the first place, kind of after doing some small works in Italy, I started having my, start of the big, let's say, not big, but my career. So I started working in this architecture firm. It's a global studio for architecture and urbanism and design, and has roots in sustainability. This is a picture of our main office in London in Battersea. So this practice is a global wide practice, which has got a kind of a worldwide reputation. We have offices around the world, but there is this concentration of basically creating one studio. And basically it's beautiful because I used to work, it was really beautiful working there because you can work with really diverse and culturally diverse and different background people. And the other factor was that you could get to work on projects all over the world, and that was quite interesting for me. There was a lot of learning behind. One of the most important aspects about this practice was that the multidisciplinary approach and this collaborative approach. Although it is an architecture practice, there are different teams, like we used to call them like support team, that help you approach the design in a kind of multidisciplinary way. So we had the structural engineers, environmental engineers, the team of urban designer, material researchers, sustainability team. And I used to work in this internal research group that our job was making, kind of internal consultancy. And, I was an environmental designer there and doing lots of research internally and externally. And also very much we were in touch with border industries and also universities. So this is a little bit of range of things they do at Foster. It's kind of it's various in scales, starting from making a little handle, going to making buildings and whole cities and urban planning. It was quite diverse, and it has that approach of integrated performance-driven design. Is that the design was supposed to be a result of the performing of how well performed rather than just the beauty of them. One another interesting thing that I just want to mention is some of my colleagues in my team did some research for a few years of how it was possible to build lunar habitat on a moon with a different challenge of the climate. So quite interesting research work going on and still going on, obviously. This was, it's an open plan office. This is a place I used to sit. These are some of my old colleagues. It was very interesting is this collaborative approach in the practice and having people with different backgrounds. So we had people with background of architecture, as myself, an environmental designer. We had mathematicians, building physics, aerospace engineers, and acoustician. Really different. But the scope was always sitting together and bring this new idea of, that it can bring together. That's ideal of the integrated design. Most recently, just over a year ago, at the beginning of the lockdown, I moved to this new company. It's called the Stanton Williams, which is in a smaller practice with about 100 people. And I moved there to kind of guide and lead the sustainability aspect of the practice. Before talking about, some of the aspects that I want my experience to share with you, I want to tell you about an anecdote. Between 2071 and 2095, when Marco Polo was traveling along the Silk Road and he was going from Venice to reach China, at some point he stopped by in a very small village, tiny village, in a very hot and uncomfortable day in Yazd in Iran. where he was offered ice cream. You know, it's quite astonishing to know that in such a hot climate, they were able to make ice cream and keep it and offer it as a welcoming to the guests. Um, this structure is this architecture that you can see here is actually an ancient ice house, so-called yakhjal. So before the invention of the modern refrigerators, Persian engineers had mastered these techniques of creating ice in winter. So they had this production of ice in winter and store it in summer and be able to offer it to their guests. So there's this dome that is at the external part of the architecture, but there's also a huge storage that you can see in the left-hand side, and also the small opening on top. And it was very interesting the way it was working, because they were able to take advantage of what climate condition and the site was offering. For instance, the different temperature between day and night in a deserting climate, and use that creativity and being able to create a refrigerator without having that easy access to the energy that we have today. Just moving really fast, in the second part of the Industrial Revolution, we started having access to innovation, especially in my industry, in the building industry. We learned that of this technology of, we could cool down our spaces with ventilation unit and cooling systems. And there were this advertisement going on in the US and saying, wherever you live, you can now enjoy cool and dry, restful comfort. And that was quite a big discovery. That was quite an interesting and innovative thing at the time. But what happened that, unfortunately, the way we, not all the architecture, but many aspects of building design has changed. So we started creating these buildings that didn't have that connection of what I showed at the beginning of that ice house. There was we created this blend environment. There was, it didn't matter what is inside the space. They were all similar, the same level of lighting, the same level of air. And people didn't stop thinking about what's happening inside. So they could be exactly in the same space and, could be produce something or be airplane, produce airplanes or just be a big factory. And there, what happened is that we lost our connection with natures and with the seasons. So it didn't matter what the outside condition is. So we start keeping that blend and very boring static environment, which somehow we are still using. We are all now inside our environment. We have this lighting on. It's the same color temperature, more or less. We more or less used to set, we are setting our temperature between 20, hopefully 2021, not more. And it doesn't really matter what's happening outdoor. So all this is bringing a challenge that we are facing today. So this creates climate change, and there is a responsibility in building industry in these emissions. So just give you background about my industry. So together, building and construction are responsible for 39% of carbon emission in the world. And that's huge. That's because of the way we started building our buildings and lost that connection, as I was explaining. So just in terms of terminology, if you're not familiar, carbon emission is so the way we measure it is the carbon dioxide, and it's the measure used to compare emissions from various greenhouse gases, but based upon the global warming potential. So you have heard a lot about carbon emission, and that's the way basically we measure it. As being an architect and a visual person, and when I communicate, I like to see things. This is how basically how 1 ton of CO2 look like. This is the kind of a visual representation of 1 ton of CO2. An interesting study that I found is that they calculated. Imagine every small ball that you can see in this picture is the measure that is 1 ton of CO2 that I showed you in previous slide. In 2010, in New York City, basically, they calculated that they added 54 million metric tons of dioxide into the atmosphere. And this image is showing a daily emission only. And unfortunately, 75% of that comes from building. That was something that made me really think about my industry and how I can make an impact and change that, hopefully. Until kind of somehow going back to the story of ice cream, it is very important that we talk about climate change. I want to take a few slides and talk about it because what is happening today does not have precedent in the history of humanity. Perhaps with our technology, with the innovation, it was a bit of dream of human, and we started use it in an excessive way, and excessive use of energy and our resources combined with perhaps with our ego, we are basically damaging our environment that we are living in. I took this image, this video from NASA, which is showing the gradual transformation of the, how the surface of the earth is changing and heating. So it's a temperature anomaly that is showing from, let's say, 1888 till today, how much we are damaging the environment and increasing the surface of the temperature of the earth. And up to now, we already increased to 1 degree C. And it is not something that is happening only in one country. This graph is showing the temperature anomaly and differences that is happening all over the world in different cities of the world. So it's connected to anyone and everyone. I don't know where, guys, you are now watching us, but wherever you are, you can see I'm sure you have a connection with this challenge that we are facing. One of the important, since I think 1992, from Rio de Janeiro, every year there's a conference on climate change, and they discuss how we can, tackle that. One of the most important agreements happened in 2015, and that was the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement, something very important, they told us, and they set up a target, and they told us we have to hold the increase of global temperature well below 2 degrees C and pursuing the efforts to limit it to 1.5. An interesting representation, the way we live in different countries and the way we use resources and we produce waste and land and so on is different in every country. For instance, the way USA and population of the USA in average are living and using the resources, if they continue living the same way, they actually need 5 planets to have a resource of 5 planets, which we don't have. In Europe, we are using 2.8, in China 2.1, in India 0.6. And in average in the whole world, today humanity uses equivalent of 1.7 Earths to provide the resources we use and absorb our waste. It's just a big challenge. Obviously, as you all know, we have only one planet. And this is what basically the Paris Agreement is asking us. The absorption emissions that are not balanced, which is creating, not that climate change, it needs to be balanced. So we have half of the planet to absorb and half of the planet to emit, and that will take us basically stop the global warming at least to 1.5. But which is a challenge. In a very simple explanation of a graph is that we have more emissions, less absorption, and this is where we need to get. And this is what I thought, the career I started would help, hopefully, somehow in a drop in the ocean of helping this. This was the first part of the presentation, and what I wanted to explain how I choose my career and my passion. The second part is about placing the health and well-being of our society and our planet at the heart of our decision making. From the way basically our buildings are built today to the amount of energy it takes to power them, we are part of a very carbon intensive industry. To me, this shows that huge opportunity in our sector to make a meaningful difference, meaningful change, and have an impact. So we need to find the smartest ways to operate our building and to build our building at the same time. So I saw this kind of crisis that happening today as an opportunity for myself to intervene and make an impact and do something about it. Sometimes I feel to look forward, we also have to look backward, and that's my connection to the story of the ice house. In the world, there are so many. I have a passion for traditional architecture, so-called vernacular architecture. There are so many great examples out there. So the population in the past, they had that capacity of adaptation and that respect to the nature that we forgot. In every, place you go, there was this connection to the climate they used to build in terms of architecture. But obviously, we need to move forward. We are in 2020. 2021 actually, and we have the technology and that power of prediction. And in my field, there's so much advancement in technology. So there's a power of prediction. We have softwares and simulators that we can simulate exactly how people feel in the space. We can estimate how the future of the building would perform, or with robotics arm, we can actually have a very interesting way of building our future of our buildings. There are some existing examples, but there are really few that they are called so-called restorative building. The meaning of restorative building is that you have to give back to the environment. So there are those buildings that produce more energy than they consume. One of the examples is Eco Building in Singapore. It was the first building that actually produced its own energy from its own waste, which is quite interesting. Or right-hand side, there's another example in Seattle. It's an example of net zero building, which has got lots of solar panels on the roof, and it produces way more energy when it needs and it store it. So we call it this type of new way of looking architecture at restorative buildings. Now this part of my session is more, I hope it's going to help all of you from different backgrounds. Although the first bit was very much on architecture and where I come from and what I'm passionate about, this part is more holistic approach on sustainability. And this is something we did in our practice. And I go a little bit of more details later on also how our practice become carbon neutral organization. So I feel the message I would like to give you is as have a holistic approach towards sustainability and try to foster sustainable business models. Again, back to my new practice, Stanton Williams. One of the first thing in our practice before I joined they did was that commitment of that network that is called UK Architect Declare of Climate and Biodiversity Emergency. So my practice, one of the founding signatory of that. So it's a network that, declare there's an emergency and somehow we have to, it says that we need to work together to tackle that. And this network started from the UK and now has spread in more than 20 different countries. It's becoming quite an interesting network. So when I moved into this practice almost less than a year ago, we set a target. I said sustainability needs to be at the forefront of our studio's agenda. So it's kind of one of the most important things we need to do in our practice. And we started together to draw this roadmap of how to get there. My industry is quite slow, so you have to think quite in advance to see how you can achieve certain targets that you're setting. So the first thing we looked at was to create this sustainability and responsibility framework for our practice. We look at, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Sustainable Development Goals, which is a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future. So look at the 17 areas. And as we said, what are the guidance that exist in my industry? Obviously, if you're students, you just finish your studies, you can take the sustainable goals and fine tune it with the industry you're going. Obviously, there will be some guidance from your industry. And we look at this together and we come up with this diagram. That's kind of through certain process of consideration. We came up with 10 themes that we thought are important for our industry, which is architecture. So these 10 themes are responding to socially, environmentally, and economically responsible design. I give you an example, community and culture and social values. We would like for every project to have an approach and look at it. What is the impact we are having to the community? Or for well-being, how people will feel inside the space, or materials. What are the materials we are using? What is the impact they will have on the environment? Another interesting thing we did was establishing this think tank group, which kind of the aim of it was to become a catalyst for driving a sustainability design ethos. And we want this group to actively contribute to the research and knowledge sharing. It's quite interesting. It is a volunteering group, and they have few subgroups that they usually look at a specific theme that are important for architecture. And the director signed up that everyone in a practice can spend 2 hours a week dedicated to this think tank group, which is quite amazing for a practice of that size. Other things we did, we started having sustainability series and CPDs, continuous professional development. We created the resources and database that everyone can get access, and everyone in the practice get an induction on sustainability. So this is part of our, telling a story of inclusivity and sharing knowledge within our practice.
Golnaz, is it
Yes.
just, sorry, the CPD, what does that stand for, sorry?
Continuous professional development. So there are talks. You just invite some of the professional from your industry or some, wherever they can contribute something. And there are a series of talks that you organize.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question. Another thing we decided to do, we achieved that in actually short time, and we are very proud of it, was that make a meaningful, the kind of, we wanted really to make a meaningful change and set that long-term vision. This is how we calculate. I go a little bit in detail, and I'm hoping that can help some of you that you're just getting into the industry or applying for job or your master's, and hoping this will give you some insight. So the question we put out there was, how can we reduce our practice carbon footprint and set a long-term vision? This was because we really wanted to play an important part for tackling climate change, and that was the biggest, and not biggest, perhaps the first step we took. And this is how we started our carbon footprint journey and how we become actually carbon neutral company. The first thing you do, you obviously need to measure your carbon footprint. We didn't know how to start. We started doing our research, and we understood that we have to calculate our annual emission, and we talked with external company who help us to calculate. But for the data, we create a group within the practice, and we started putting together data. Just a very brief background. When you calculate your carbon footprint, as a definition, there are 3 scopes of emissions you have to consider. Scope 1 is the direct emission that comes from your activity. For instance, if you're producing something that have emission. The second scope is those indirect emissions that are associated with what you buy. For instance, for electricity, you're not producing, you're just buying it from a third party. And a scope 3 emissions, which are the most complicated one to define, is that all the indirect activities that are kind of occur outside of control of your organization. For instance, how you come to the practice or your office, your business travel, how much waste you have, your paper, hotel stay, and so on. So it was quite complex to define that. And this is kind of the final results of our calculations. This is in 1 year, our emission was around 79 tons of CO2, and those kind of distribution, obviously business travel and site electricity were the one that had a bigger impact. Just obviously every area has got lots of details, and it goes, you can divide it. Just one portion of that I wanted to show you was about how our employee travel to work. That was happening before the lockdown. We discovered that our colleagues are quite environmentally conscious people. Actually, 97% of our employees, they were walking, cycling, or taking public transportation to get to the practice, and that was kind of made us quite proud. And the second part of our journey was we decided to set our targets, and we decided to become carbon neutral plus organization. I will explain to you what that means. First of all, when you assess, the first thing you have to do, you assess your carbon. And then you can decide to become carbon neutral, or you become carbon neutral organization. Carbon neutral means that if you have certain emission, you decide to absorb more or offset more than your emission. That takes you a step further, and there you become carbon neutral organization. And for us, this was the key milestone for our practice and our commitment to the climate change. So the third part was we decided to choose an offsetting schemes to offset our emissions. I will explain to you in a minute what offsetting scheme means. And the most important things was actually identifying emission reduction opportunities for that practice. So how does offsetting a scheme works? First of all, you have your emissions and you find organization and businesses or certified organization that you give them some money and they offset your emission, and then you kind of cancel your carbon footprint. Obviously, in a very poor term, offset is essentially paying someone to clean up your pollution, and obviously can raise some ethical concerns. But why we choose it? Why? So if it is controversial, but I can explain why we decided to eventually use a carbon offset scheme. First of all, is the only way for now to do it, because you basically you have certain emissions. But when we did more research, we understood that carbon offsetting is also about funding projects around the world that can reduce carbon by measurable and verifiable amount. If you don't have that extra carbon finance, perhaps you can't help certain communities and certain organizations. There are really interesting projects out there. You just need to find the best projects that are quite verified and they're trustworthy. And also, this could be an effective way to reduce global emissions and create some sustainable development benefits that alternatively wouldn't happen. Just for information, there are some interesting organizations like Gold Standard and Vera. They are verified international schemes, and it's the best way to offset your scheme is choosing one of those. If this is of interest of anyone is listening today. And we try to be inclusive. So we involve the whole practice. We ask everyone in a plastic, we launch a poll, and we gave a presentation. We ask everyone to contribute and help us to choose an offsetting scheme. At the end, the result of the poll was that people decided to go to basically support the protection of rainforestation in Kenya and Amazonian rainforest in Brazil. So that was quite the two schemes we decided to choose because people did vote for it. We also discussed very much internally, and we set a budget, said we wanted, as we went beyond carbon neutrality, we wanted also to contribute something it was close to our heart and something that is within where our practice is. So we partnered with Forest Carbon, his organization, and we bought this land, but we kind of contribute to planting of the woodland in Lake District National Park. The reason we did that is because once we decided to go beyond carbon neutrality is also we wanted to contribute to ecology and ecosystem, and we wanted to provide wider environmental benefit and for the nature and ecosystem and so on. I'm getting to the end of this part. So one of as I said, the most important decision we made is to set those find those reduction opportunities and set a long-term target. As I said, carbon offset gold rush should not distract us from climate change, because that's not the answer really. So we decided, I don't know if you have heard about science-based targets. These are kind of science-based target initiatives. Is a joint initiative. It was launched in 2015 after the Paris Agreement. It's an initiative between UK Global Impact, World Resources, and WWF. And the targets are considered science-based because they're aligned with what of the latest climate science are telling us. And you can apply, and they help you to set this long-term target. You can apply for keeping the global warming below 2 degrees C, or which a more difficult target to achieve is keeping it to 1.5. We apply for the second one, and our target has been agreed, which we are very proud, and we just started our journey and started doing this. So this was the story of how our company became a carbon neutral organization and how we set for science-based targets. My last part is what I want to share with you, and then we will open to the platform to the question and answer. Is I think it's important that we embrace a new universal vision and be the change. Whatever you can see the problem out there, try to tackle that and be part of that change. And that's the best way you can impact your future. Be more curious, courageous, responsible, and creative. It's not easy. Sometimes you might start a path and change your path through what you started, but it doesn't matter. The failures are actually good. I can tell you I learned more from my failures rather than my victories. And we are living in a very difficult time right now. We have the crisis of the pandemic. There will be recession that coming after. There is a problem of the climate change. So we need to have this new vision. And these crises, you can make this crisis somehow the way that you can find your way to tackle them. And that's where I started my career of having started with my passion and saying what's the problem is and how can I influence somehow in making a difference and making a change. Recently, I liked what Bill Gates said. He published in Twitter saying, solving climate change would be the most amazing thing humanity has ever done. And by comparison, ending the pandemic is very, very easy. So that's a big challenge, and we need lots of people to work on it. And we somehow need really to come back and create that connection with the nature that we lost. And this can be something that if you get to this path and this career, you're making a huge impact to the environment and to society. And another message I wanted to give you is that you don't really need to have sustainability in your job title to lead your organization into the future. Yes, my title is sustainability manager, but anyone in any industry can make an impact, and especially in terms of tackling climate change. My last video is a message that I wanted to share from David Attenborough.
If there's one thing we all have to do, it is to avoid waste. Not to waste food, energy, plastics, or time. Each of us can use our actions and our voice to save our planet. We may be in different countries, of different ages, or facing different challenges in our daily lives. So the way we make an impact is different for each of us. What is important is that we try, and that we try as if our very future depends upon it.
My last slide is that I just put together all the takeaways that I wanted. Hopefully I did communicate, I don't know, but that was the purpose of it. I wanted to communicate this point. The first one was choose a career that is aligned with your values and strive to impact positively the environment and common good of the society. The second point is place the health and well-being of the society and our planet at the heart of your decision making. And have a holistic approach towards sustainability and try to foster sustainable business models. And that's something that you can apply in any type of business. Make a meaningful change. Set a clear long-term vision, but don't be afraid of adjusting your path. So be brave. Also, if you start a path and you realize it's not for you, be brave to change that. I didn't talk much in my presentation about networking, but I think it's very important that you start network with people, or let's say sectors that you are interested. Just get in touch with them. Be brave. Just go and write to them. And when you do some application for work, just be very unique. Don't try to put your CV together, but write that letter that that it shows that you know about the practice or the place you're going, and shows a little bit of your personality and what that difference you want to make, the impact you want to make. So courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves to be seen. And the last point is embrace a new universal vision and be the change. Be more curious, courageous, responsible, and creative. And I think that's the way we need to go, especially with the time of crisis. That was my presentation, and I hope there are some questions. And I hope I inspire some of you. Perhaps I didn't inspire everyone, but that was the purpose. So stop sharing now.
Yeah, thank you, Golnaz. That was wonderful. I mean, I wish we were all here to give you a proper round of applause, but thank you. It was really inspiring to hear all the different, it was interesting. You were saying how to have this holistic approach to sustainability, and you yourself, in the way it seemed on your own journey and the way you're encouraging the audience as well, was also taking that end goal as part of our means of figuring a career, and then, as you were saying, to really focus on our passions and see what are the opportunities available to us to kind of bring about this sustainability. So yeah, I'm sure I speak on behalf of the audience to thank you. And we've had a few questions come in. So
Great.
if I just give you the first one. So the first one's from Una, and it's she's got two questions. So I'll just do the first part. And she asks, what do you think about the problem of introducing positive energy or eco buildings to very old historical cities? She says she lives in Paris.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thanks for the question. In the practice, in my new practice, Stanton Williams, we actually work a lot with refurbishment. And we are at the moment working on Museum of London. We are refurbishing. So there are more challenges around, some sort of challenges around refurbishing the existing buildings in old cities. But at the same time, there is also advantage of that, because basically in the building industry, there are two main streams that are producing carbon. One is the operational, how the buildings are operating, the lighting we are using, the air conditioning and so on. And the other is how the buildings are built. So that has got actually huge impact, the way that we have buildings made on concrete and glass, and the process of making those materials is quite heavy, carbon heavy. So actually sometimes refurbishing buildings, you are saving a lot, this so-called embodied carbon. It means that how much that material you're using has the carbon itself, and or the process is producing carbon. So has got lots of advantages on that. A disadvantage is how you actually remodernize that. We know that we need insulations and double glazing and so on to save some energy. But it is possible. It is more complicated, especially in a historical context. You have to respect the history, but it is possible actually to update our old buildings. And I'm really pro refurbishment.
Thank you for answering that. And just got another question we'll come to at the end, I think. There's another question here from Matilda, and she asks, what kind of innovations have you been using or are thinking you could use for applying sustainability in your business? Sort of following on from the first question.
Very good question. In terms of innovation in pure architecture engineering, there's a lot happening. So there are ways how you control your buildings, automatic lighting that switch on and off, changing the color of, the lighting temperature that gives you, some benefit for the health. This so-called BMS systems that they control the whole buildings. There's a lot in innovation, or the material innovation, how you can use recycle process of materials. And there is a lot happening now on reclaimed, stones and bricks that someone used in the past. So these are, I can see that as an innovation, and there is a lot happening of using robotic arm to, some people are against it, how to create this new sustainable buildings. But in terms of innovation generally in a practice, for I'm more familiar with my industry, but I'm sure there are other ways of, connecting with people with apps, or I think we learn a lot from pandemic as well. We going to our offices, using transportation or our personal cars. There's a lot of emission, but thanks to the innovation and technology, now we are actually talking to each other. And I've been going to a new practice in the middle of the pandemic. I actually never met some of my colleagues, but it still was possible to work. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And in thinking about these kind of sustainable solutions as well, we have another question here from George, who asks if you've experienced any obstacles in applying sustainable solutions to your work.
All the time, every day. Absolutely. Although it's, we are, as architects and designers, we are advocates of sustainability and good design. But who make decisions are clients. So generally, you really need a good client that understands the problem. The society is changing. Things are changing. People are really pro sustainability. They want to change those aspects. But sometimes, because certain aspects are new, especially innovation, they cost more. So convincing your client that needs to pay a little bit more to get a more sustainable building. Not always a sustainable building costs more, don't get me wrong, but for certain aspect is. So that is the big obstacle of convincing people that's the right way to do. But our industry is changing, especially last few years. The way now clients are seeing it, they actually see the benefit of sustainability and the health of the people in the space, and also for the planet. And luckily, in the UK, and I know in London, they are bringing carbon tax. Is something that if you emit extra of what is your limit for a building, you have to pay a tax. So that thing is actually helping some of the clients generally, to be afraid of, not paying extra tax. So they kind of want to spend a little bit more at the beginning. But that's a daily base, a challenge we have. And also about knowledge. That's why we started think tank group in the practice, because many aspects are new, and people that they have the approach of designing was different, and they have to learn new skills, and there are many things happening. So that's why we started this knowledge sharing in the practice.
Thank you. And I think also, as you were speaking, really highlighting for young people as well, that it's not just on the individual level, but also on the institutional level that we interact with these sort of changes and how they reinforce the initiative, the work of each other. And we have a question here from Casper. I think is studying architecture, and he asks, do you find that other stakeholders, such as local planning authorities and contractors, share your commitment to sustainability? And in cases where they haven't, how has your practice tackled this?
Oh, very good question. So in terms of local planning, they are very slow. Regulation is changing really slowly. There's a new GLA, which is a Greater London Plan, has got really nice and beautiful high targets. Teams are changing, especially for London, but not in the rest of the UK. So there are some initiatives. If you look at them, Caspar, is called LETI, London Energy Transformation Initiative, and now it's becoming actually something that all over the Europe they're looking at it. It's a network of professionals that they're putting their expertise together to bring this knowledge and to share it with everyone, which is fantastic. It's actually free, and we all contribute with our free time on it. And in terms of contractors and our basically other stakeholders like developers, that's changing. It's actually is amazing how that's changed. We had a project that started last year and somehow stopped, and now they come back as a big developer and they set amazing high-level sustainability because they think the future is in this. Obviously, for them, there's a lot of thinking of how much benefit economically you get out of it, but it has been demonstrated that actually there is a benefit. It's actually good for your business. And as you're saying that if we have stakeholders and people that they don't agree with our ideas, we started having this sustainability framework. That's where we share our framework with our clients, and we try to set KPIs, which is key performance indicators for each area, and then tell them this is where you are, this is how you can get there, and perhaps how much it costs and how much benefit you get out of it. So we try constantly to communicate with them why for us is important. And we always communicate with them that, we are part of this network of Architect Declare, and we committed, and for us it's important to go. And luckily, actually, we've been very lucky with our clients. I can say we have been having really good clients, at least the one that we interact with. And the other things we are thinking right now is giving a broader presentation to our clients to tell them about the problem and how we can tackle the solution. So these are some steps we are taking.
Thank you for responding to that. And I think it also highlighted how you shared towards the end of your talk a takeaway to be more curious, to be courageous, responsible, creative. And I think as young people, sometimes it can also be a bit daunting going into these new spaces and not necessarily having the experience, but recognizing we all need to be learning shoulder to shoulder, regardless of our sort of experience. And we have a question from Adora, and she says, I'm studying her master's in sustainable development, and sometimes she worries about coupling sustainability ideologies with the different sustainability policy frameworks that are being introduced, and she asks if you have any advice on this.
So sustainable development sometimes coupling with some ideologies. I'm not very familiar, perhaps, in the specific sector you're talking about the sustainable developments. But, I understand when you talk about sustainability ideologies. Generally, also, where we do is where you want to be, it's very high, and when you end up being, it's usually lower. But try to set the targets as high as possible to just go closer than that. And it is very important when, for instance, in our practice, we set our framework of sustainability. There was lots of conversation, lots of lots of consultation within the practice of who has got more experience, who has got less, and learn from them how we got there, and set this vision. And wherever sector you are, to we have this clear vision from sustainable goals, but then you have to adjust it in the sector you are, and those adjustments are quite important, and they might take time to fine-tune your framework and the way you want to work, and start setting targets. And if you think that that's not working, don't be afraid of change that, to look at it again, discuss it again, and perhaps change that. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
Thank you. I think, that was interesting to think about it in that way. And another question, I think we have time just for a couple more. From Una again, she just asked if you had any tips around networking. I think maybe is one from what you're sharing as well, is that our collective approach of supporting each other as well, that it's not just on one person's shoulder. And when you shared that the diagram of how one country, one nation is using, it was average 1.7 Earths or something. So how in this way can we work together and network?
Tips for networking. Yes. So be courageous, because sometimes this person or this place is not going to respond my answer, or they are not going to accept me. Just go for it. The fact that you're here right now is because you want to learn something, and perhaps to find out who are the other people, they have the similar interests. So go to those hubs, those gatherings, and those things that, people, you can meet people that have a similar interest of yours. And in terms of a platform, I found LinkedIn quite a good platform for networking. So you can apply, to add people in your list, or perhaps write a message, which is kind of would be the tips of, if you want to, to get to be connected with somebody specific, and give them a reason. And just be there, and to participate. That's perhaps would be my networking tips. And if you're applying for a job, don't be afraid of applying hundreds and thousands, but try to be focused those that you think you can have an impact, and your values, and they're aligned with them. You know that we are living in a time of crisis. It's not really to find one, but I also read some really positive news that with that some of the companies are starting hiring actually now. And when you this is not really networking, but one advice, and when you're applying for a job, personalized things that you're. Don't send generic CVs. They don't look at it. They always want to find that specific thing, and show them that you know enough about the company you're applying. Yeah.
Thank you, Golnaz. And just quickly, another question from Louise. It says about this link between ego that you mentioned earlier and climate change, and how with ego we're damaging this environment. So she just asked if you could explain a little bit on how you think this relationship will change in the coming years. Any predictions and thoughts?
Very good question. I'm very positive about the future because I'm positive about new generations. When you talk about climate change with new generation, there are just few people that would say is not happening or is there false accusations. So the ego that I connected to the climate change is that we didn't think about our planet. We just, perhaps my generation are a bit of older generation, that all happened in 30, 40 years. Excessive use of plastic, excessive use of not recycled materials and resources. That's part of our ego, because I didn't think if I do that, I actually damaging something. And I'm very positive with all the new movements in happening and people, because older generation, they said we might not be there when the climate change and things are, but the new generation, you all think that I will be there, and I want to see the beauty that it's this beauty that is right now, and I want to continue to see that. That was my connection with the ego, that we didn't think about our other people in the planet, and also the planet itself. So, and that relationship, I'm 100% positive will change, because you are the future and you want to see a better world. And I see in my also a new generation of architects that they are so excited about sustainability, and I don't see that excitement in the older generations.
Thank you, Golnaz, and thank you again, everyone, for the questions. I think it was really insightful.
Yeah, it was amazing. Some of them were quite difficult. Sorry if I couldn't answer.
I think it's very much an ongoing conversation that we're going to have to explore. And just thank you so much again, Golnaz, for sharing today with us, and how we can be this change and how we can advance the well-being of people and our planet together.
Thank you for having me. And Aishna, you did an amazing job to organize this very well event.
Yes,
I followed also other speakers, and it was really amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of other speakers, it goes on. We're on day 3, but tomorrow at 1 p.m. GMT time, in the same spirit of sustainability, Alejandro and Daniela are going to speak to us over live stream about sustainable food consumption, how to create a business around sustainable food, and they're social entrepreneurs. So that will be really exciting to listen to their talk. So do join us tomorrow 1 p.m. GMT time. And just before we end, I just wanted to share about some events that are being organised by the Career Equity Project at the Sussex Students' Union to really help young people think about advancing career development, and in particular for students of marginalised backgrounds. And so I'm just going to share this website that you guys can check out and explore more for yourselves. And here it will show you the different aims of this project, the purpose behind it. And as you can see here, there's lots of different kind of events happening that you can sign up for and join and to share as well. So yeah, once again, thank you so much, Golnaz, for joining us, to our lovely audience, and take care to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Caramel. Thank you so